Should you or should you not be carrying a round in the chamber in your EDC or self-defense gun? This topic is widely debated, but I'm sure there's a lot of you out there that are either new to concealed carry, maybe you've been doing it for a while, and maybe you're a little uncomfortable with choosing one versus the other. You're gonna wanna listen to this video. For those of you who are dead set on one way or the other, you know, I'm probably not going to change your mind, but I hope I give you some things to think about. We're going to be talking about some of the important things around the issue, and I'm going to leave you with some rules that'll help you, whichever option you choose, to be a little bit safer, and then maybe we're going to do some shooting to talk about it. So stick around. We're going to be talking about whether or not you should carry around in the chamber or not. I think whether or not you should carry around in the chamber or not is often focused on whether or not which one performs the best. Now clearly having around in the chamber is going to give you the advantage of speed, all right? There's less opportunity for a malfunction. I think that's undisputed. If you go to rack around and you don't do it properly, you can have that potential for an issue. So a lot of people that are really, you know, pro gun or have experience shooting, they're always going to say that. But I think the operative word in the question is whether or not you should be carrying around in the chamber. So it's not one way or the other, and we're going to talk about that here in a little bit. But the reality is I think you need to do what works best for you. We're going to talk about the potential trade-offs. For those of you who maybe don't feel comfortable yet carrying around in the chamber, you're probably concerned about an accidental discharge. So let's talk about some of the ways that we can tell if a round is in the chamber, and we're going to go right into the basics, and then we're going to dive right in a little bit deeper. First, let's talk about proper safety checks for whatever method you choose. First thing you want to do is, and this is very critical for those of you who are getting started, is remove the magazine first. This one gets a lot of people, and we're going to talk about why. The next thing you're going to want to do is actually lock that slide to the rear, and you're going to want to remove the round. So once I've done that, I can actually look in the chamber itself and the barrel, and I can look and see that the firearm is clear. Once I've done that, now I know it's clear. Now, there's some other ways and there's some other tools that people use to verify it. So, for example, this is my EDC gun. I know there's a round in the chamber, and this is just how I carry, right? So there's some additional ways that I check that. The trigger has been reset and it's ready to go. So if I see it locked to the rear, that's one thing. I can also see the shell casing. Additionally, there are other firearms that have additional indicators on them that let you know if there's a round in the chamber or not. But you're always going to want to check, right? So some people get really offended if you do a press check where you take a peek in there to see that shell casing. Some people say you got to do the whole process all the time. At the end of the day, if it's a firearm that you're concealed carrying and you know that firearm, you're going to want to check every time, and you're going to want to know that you're in that the configuration that you want and that you're following the rules. At the end of the day, this one gets a lot of people in trouble because they will look in the chamber without pulling the magazine, and then they'll actually load a round, and then they'll break another rule, which is engaging the trigger, and that's how you have that accidental discharge, and you don't want that. So once you are aware of the condition of your firearm and you've properly cleared it or properly loaded, now you're good to go to talk about the next thing that you're going to want to talk about, which is what you're going to choose from this point forward. If you decide to carry without a round in the chamber, I'm going to give you a configuration that I recommend because I think it's particularly helpful. This is something I used to do on active duty. And first, you're going to clear the weapon like we talked about. You're going to verify that it's look and then double look, be 100% sure that it's unloaded. And then as you can see, the trigger has been reset, but there isn't a round in the chamber. So what I like to do, Glock has multiple safeties, but I actually will engage the trigger. So now, even if somehow there was a round in there, it'd be kind of hard to get one in there without this. Even if there was, the trigger is already depressed. So if you're carrying without a round in the chamber, I load a magazine. In order for this gun to go off, I'm going to have to rack that round, reset the trigger before it's in a position. But in addition, I can verify, doing my check, that hey, this is how I carry the gun. Trigger's depressed to the rear, and it cannot go off. So I think this is a good little double, almost like a double check, if you will, for someone who's decided to not carry around in the chamber. And before I lose some of you, because some people are just think that you should never carry this way, We'll do some actual kind of side-by-side shooting to kind of talk about that. But this is something that if you're just getting started out, you could try just carrying your gun around with you. Maybe feel a little bit more comfortable, and ultimately work yourself to the point where you've graduated to the point where you feel comfortable carrying with around in the chamber. So we have like these universal rules to gun safety, maybe you've heard of them, and we have all these different rules and acronyms that a lot of gun people like to use and abbreviations, but we don't really have any rules for the configuration you carry. They say either you should or you shouldn't do it that way. So I've come up with 3 kind of rules for how you should carry, so we're going to dive right into those. Rule number 1, don't carry around in the chamber unless you're certain that that trigger can be protected at all times. So for example, if you had a gun that was maybe accessible or not in a safe, right, or not in a secure holster, right, maybe you should consider clearing or emptying that gun. If it's a duty gun or an EDC gun and you are maintaining positive control at all times and you're carrying it, I think it's okay to do that. But if you have any doubt of whether or not that trigger is secure at all times, just clear it out and don't carry around in the chamber. You can always load around pretty quickly, so don't do that. Rule number 2, and you've probably heard me mention this rule in other applications and other videos, is train from the configuration or the position that you carry. So in this case, if you are carrying without a round in the chamber, guess what? You're going to be training to include racking around in that draw. And I shot side by side in a previous video about that. So if you are carrying around in the chamber, you're going to practice that. I don't recommend switching back and forth, because then if you, let's say, have a duty pistol and you forget, and you can find yourself messing yourself up that way. So whatever you choose to carry, try that out and then train from that particular configuration and become confident and proficient from that position. Rule number 3, don't carry around in the chamber unless you're comfortable with it. So I think, like all things, the more proficient you become, the more comfortable you become. I hear a lot of people that say, if you can't carry around in the chamber, I've seen this in other YouTube videos, that don't carry at all. I think that's ridiculous. Anybody who says that you're better off without a gun completely than without having to rack around, which takes less than a second, I think is just ridiculous. Now, they're going to point to these circumstances where, oh, if they had a round in the chamber, that 1/10 of a second could have saved somebody's life. I don't care what they say. Do what works best for you. And ultimately, I think if you get comfortable concealed carrying, I'll tell you a story about that here in a second. If you get comfortable concealed carrying, you're going to find yourself, after some training and practice, getting to the point where you can do that. But if somebody says don't even bother, I think that's just kind of ridiculous, and you need to train for the needs that you have. Concealed carry alone can feel, for those of us who didn't grow up around firearms or weren't military and law enforcement, I had a friend a few years back that got his first gun and got his concealed carry permit, and we went out to eat and he had his firearm on him for the first time, and he was talking about how, you know, he's like, wow, this is really weird, nobody's looking at me. Even though it was concealed carried, he was just excited that he had this and that, you know, it was this opportunity for him. So it was all new and fresh, and he had all these concerns about all this and whether or not somebody could see the gun printing and all that. So for those of you that are just getting started, getting your first gun and getting your permit and concealed carrying, that's going to have a lot of uncertainties on its own, and people that have kind of grown up around that may not be able to relate to that. So that kind of ties us back to rule number 3. Just do what's comfortable for you. Don't let anybody tell you what you should or shouldn't do. Try it out, get your feet a little bit wet, get some training in, and then make the decision from there. So those are my 3 rules about carrying around in the chamber, and let me know what you think about those rules. I think those should help most people, and we will continue out at the range here, and we'll actually kind of shoot some side by side, so we'll see what the benefits are. All right, real quick, one of the things I wanted to do, we're going to be doing a timed one next, and if you notice, my hands were at my side. A lot of people, when they're shooting these videos, they've got their hands tucked nice and neatly and they're trying to go for speed. I'm going to be shooting from kind of a position where if you were walking around and you needed to draw your weapon, you'd be kind of in a normal stance. So the goal is not necessarily to look at the times that we're going to be getting. We're going to be kind of going at a moderate pace, but we're going to be looking at kind of the differences in the time, because that difference for let's say an average shooter, is going to be really where the benefit is for you personally. Does that make sense? So if you're not the world record shooter with a sub-second draw, right, the split is really where you're going to see the difference. So we're going to time it, and you're going to look at that side by side. All right, that was a 187 with the first shot at a 1.6. All right, that was a 1.66 with the first shot at a 1.42. Let's try it again. .17 and a 1.47. All right, it was a 1.77 and a 2.03. So just a couple of groups there. You can see that you're going to get the difference between around in the chamber or not in the chamber. It looks like about 0.3 or 0.4 of a second. So it's not a huge difference. Now, if you train to rack around and go to your first shot, there is a time penalty. There is a risk of a malfunction. But for the 99.9% of the day that you're carrying your concealed carry around, in the scenario that you actually do use it, you have to be mindful of the drawbacks to whatever you choose. I would always rather have a gun with me, with a round in the chamber or not, than the other way around. So I would really like to emphasize the fact that you should be concealed carry. Don't be intimidated by it. Get some training. The penalty is there. The time penalty is there. And if you notice, again, for our demonstration, in real life, if you were to pull your gun out for a self-defense situation, you're probably not going to have that sub-second draw anyways. My hands were at my side. Imagine you're walking around at the mall. You're probably going to have to take a second or two just to assess what's going on. When you're out at the range and you're training for something, you see the scenario coming, it's much easier to draw quickly. The training's important, it's quick, but you're still going to want to go back to maintaining good situational awareness. The time penalty shouldn't be too much if you're training properly. It is there. The risk of a malfunction is there. I recommend that you carry around in the chamber for your everyday carry, but like I said, going back to the rules, unless you're comfortable with it, don't do it. Be aware of the limitations of both and choose what works best for you. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I'm sure I'm going to get some hate for even advocating that people might want to carry without a round in the chamber until they get comfortable. At the end of the day, I don't care what those people think. I care about making you feel comfortable with what works best for you. So we got to see kind of a side-by-side demonstration. Again, weren't going for the fastest times, just hands at our side, kind of seeing what that would play out real life. And as you can see, it's not a whole lot. We hope you liked this video. Thanks for sticking around. Be sure to check us out at firststepgunessentials.com. You can support the channel by picking up some gear and maybe checking out your local gun range. So if you have any questions or comments, let us know. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook and leave a comment below. We'll see you next time out at the range at firststepgunessentials.com.